One of the first and most common questions we get here at Big Red Barn, especially right after people have learned to make soap, is how do I label my soaps? I think everybody's pretty aware that labels are needed. There's some very specific information on the labels, but it's a little nebulous on what is required here. How do I go about creating these labels for my soaps? So we're going to dive into that here in our little mini series on labeling your soaps. So grab your coffee and let's dive into getting you started on making your soap labels. First, let's talk about what is going on in the labeling world legally. There are different categories of labels. What are they? And what's going on there? What are the rules around them? So first of all, we need to understand that there are different categories of labels. There is a category of labels for soap. Soap is actually an exception, and there's a little bucket that you can label your soaps just as soaps, and there's a few less requirements there if you want to do that. We're going to dive into that in just a second. There's also a category for cosmetics. And that's if you think about your makeups, the lotions, like any skincare products, for the most part, those are labeled as cosmetics. And there's a little bit different labeling requirements there. But there is also a category for drugs. And you're thinking, oh, like prescription drugs, cold medicines, things like that. I'm not doing any of that, so I don't have to worry about drugs. But it's really easy to slip into making drug claims about your soaps, and we're going to talk about that as well. So first, let's talk about what would a soap claim be. If you're in that first category that's just for soaps, what are the things you can say about your product, either online, on your in person, or on your labels? Like, what can you say there? If you are in this first category of soaps, you're trying to label them over here, then the only thing you can say about your soap is that it will clean you. That's it. This is a soap. It will cleanse. It will make you clean, squeaky clean. So this category, although it's very specific, it's the exception. It was intended to make soap labeling simple. It is pretty restrictive, especially if you are making a goat milk soap or some other kind of specialty soap where there's a lot more that this soap offers people than just that it will clean them. So there is this category, but there are restrictions there to what you can do or what you can say about it. Now, the thing that catches people off guard is if you are labeling your soap just as soap, then the claims that you make about that soap, it is what you say about your soap online, on your website, in your social media, in person as you're talking to people, and also on your labels. So you have to be very careful that you don't step out of that box if you're going to label your soaps just as soaps and put them in that special exception category. The next step up is labeling your soaps as a cosmetic. Now, as labeling it as a cosmetic, that might sound like, oh, there's going to be too many hoops, I don't want to do that. But it really isn't that different. It has all the same requirements as the soap category, plus you need to add an ingredients list. Now, I don't find that to be objectionable at all, because if I was a soap customer, I would want to know what was in that soap. And I know all of you have looked at soaps at, gift shops and other places while you're on vacation, whatever. And the first thing you do is you pick up and you're like, well, what did they make it out of? And you're looking for that ingredients list. And if I find a soap, out there in the world that does not have the ingredients list on it, I am immediately skeptical. And it might be the most lovely soap on the planet, but because they won't tell me what's in it, I'm not going to purchase it. So I would really encourage you to really consider labeling your soap as a cosmetic. Do it voluntarily, even though you don't have to. Do it voluntarily. It's like a show of good faith to your customer that you were forthcoming with what's in the soap product, because they're going to want to know. So you took that first step, you told them, and now they're going to be more comfortable purchasing your soap. So that's the cosmetic category. Now, what can you say about your product if you're labeling it as a cosmetic? You can say it will moisturize, it will nourish, it will soothe, it will support. So if you're doing a specialty soap, if you've got all these lovely oils and butters and things in your soaps, obviously you're going to want to say this is a moisturizing soap. This soap is going to nourish your skin. It's going to soothe any, skin issues you've got going on. It's just really helpful for getting your skin in a better place. Just all of these great things about your soap. Now, there is another category I mentioned before, the drug category. And this is where, this category of things requires FDA approval. So think about anything you've purchased that's a drug kind of thing. Maybe you have a prescription lotion or other, gosh, I can't think of any examples right now, but other things that come with, they have dosages on them, and they have the list of potential side effects and other things, and usually they come in a box, and there's this whole big fold out sheet of paper of all the things you're supposed to read about this product. Those things are being labeled as drugs. Now, so that's a category, there are a lot more hoops to jump through for getting that FDA approval, for figuring out what all you need to have on your product to label it as a drug. Now, it's not impossible to do. I have seen people do it. It is a lot more messing around. But here's where people get kind of hung up about just things you need to be careful of when we're dealing, because you're dealing with a skincare product. Things you need to be careful of. If you are not going to jump through those hoops and get FDA approval, then you cannot say about your product that it will heal, that it will cure, that it will treat. Those are all drug claims. So if somebody comes to you and says, oh my gosh, your soap is so great, it healed my kid's eczema, that might be true. You can't say it. You cannot say that. You cannot put that on your website. You cannot put that in your social media. You cannot put that on your label. Nothing. You can't use that anywhere. So even if people are saying that to you, you need to be very careful, because you're making a drug claim. And if anybody looks into that, anybody who cares looks into that, they're going to find that you are not FDA approved, but yet you're making these claims. So you have to be very, very careful when you are labeling your products, that you don't make drug claims when you're not labeling as a drug. So let's go through that again. The words you have to avoid are heal, treat, cure. Okay? Whoop! Set those aside. Find a different group of, remember the cosmetic claims, nourish, soothe, support, moisturize. All of those are great. Stay away from the other words. Okay. So those are the different categories. And of those three, I choose the cosmetic category. I feel like the drug claims, there might be some things over there that are true that it would be nice to say about my products, but I'm not going to do that category yet. But the soap category, even though it's an exception intended to make things easier, it doesn't give me enough flexibility in what I'm going to say about my stuff. And I know myself well enough to know that I'm going to want to talk about what this soap can do for people's skin. So I choose to label my soaps and everything in the cosmetic category. Again, it's a show of good faith to my customers that I'm willing to tell them what's in the product, because they're looking for that anyway. And it just gives me more flexibility as I'm talking about my products and presenting them to the world. So what are the details of these three different categories: soap, cosmetic, and drug categories for labeling products, labeling skincare products? Let's dive into that. I'm going to share my screen so that you can get a little idea of what needs to go where and what these requirements are for getting your soaps ready to go. So let's take a look at this other screen. All right, so here we are. Just a second, I lost my bearings. Hang on just a second. Okay, there we go. All right, so here is our, we're going to get started here talking about what goes on your soap label. You'll see an example in the picture on the left there of one of our soap labels, just to give you an idea what they can look like. But as we move forward, there are soap label requirements. Now, this I think catches some people off guard because they don't realize that there are actual legal requirements for labeling your soaps. It isn't just an artistic free-for-all where you can just, whatever you want to put on there is great. Let people know your amazing product in your very own way. There is some of that, but there are also some legal things that you're going to need to put on your label. So, if you think about it, we're talking about skincare. We're talking about things that could have allergens for some people. We're talking about like how big is this soap bar compared to that soap bar, and how do people know that they're getting a good deal? If they're comparing prices, how do they know is this one bigger? Is that one bigger? Sometimes they're deceiving. So there are just some requirements of things that you need to have on your soap labels, because we're talking about skincare, because we're talking about being fair to the consumers and different things like that. So let's go through what they are. First of all, we're talking first about the soap category. That category that is just for labeling your soap as soap and only saying that it will clean. Now, these are not suggestions. This is what you must legally have on your soap labels. Now, once you know this and you have this information, you're going to look at other soap makers and you're going to find people who are doing it wrong. Because, like I said, there's a lot of confusion out there about what these things are. Now, just to be clear, my go-to person for learning about this is Marie Gale with the Handcrafted Soap and Cosmetics Guild. So if you want to learn a little bit more about this, or maybe you want to go a little more in depth, or just even check that what I'm saying is correct, I would look for her on YouTube. Again, it's Marie Gale with the Handcrafted Soap and Cosmetics Guild. And just those are just some other videos you can watch to get more detail and just another opinion if you'd like to have that. So, first of all, we're talking about the soap category. So, the first thing that is required is you have to identify your product as soap. That seems silly. We all know this is soap. Like you're so close to it, you just like, of course this is soap. It's a bar. I mean, goodness, what would people think this was other than soap? And you will be surprised at how many people will come up to my table and go, "So what is this? Cheese?" No, it's not cheese. It's soap. So you just have to be very clear so that people don't mistakenly buy something that they thought was something else. Now, you also need to have the net weight, both in ounces and in grams. So you're using the English measurements and the metric. You just need to have both of them there. They need to be on the bottom of the front label, and that O has to be a special size. I'm going to tell you that in just a second. Now, you also need to identify your business name. So you're going to want to make sure you've got your business name on there. For me, that would be Big Red Barn. And those are the things to have on the front label. Now that O, the lowercase o in the word in the ounce there, that needs to be an eighth of an inch tall. So you need to create your label, print off like a prototype, and take a ruler or a measuring tape and measure that O, and make sure you've got it an eighth of an inch tall. It's bigger than you think. So be sure to start there when you are designing your labels. Get that thing big enough so that you can then make everything else on your label look proportionate and not figure out later, oh, I gotta make that bigger, and now it's crowding your label. All right, on the back label, again, this is in that soap category, that category where all you can say is that it will clean. On the back, oh, there, that's what those words say too. You need to have your name. This is the name of the responsible party. If something happens with the soap and there is an issue, they need to know who made the soap. Who do they contact? If there's something, somebody has a reaction to it or whatever, they need to know how to contact you for more information. You need to have your address and your city, state, and zip. Again, they have to know how to contact you if they have a problem or they need to have more information about this product. So now let's talk now about labeling your soap as a cosmetic. So we're in that middle category where it is a soap, but we're going to label it as a cosmetic just to be to make that first step of trust with our customers, let them know what's in our soap. So, the front label of the soap is the same. So, you're going to have your business name, you're identifying it as soap. Now, you can expand from that. You can call it goat milk soap. You could call it face soap, body soap, hand soap, foot soap, whatever you want to call it. But you do just have to make sure that it does have the word soap in there somewhere, and then the weight in ounces and grams. The back label has one addition to the back label for soap, and that is our ingredients list. Now, when you're labeling your soap this way, labeling your product as a cosmetic, you can then say it will moisturize, soothe, support. You have those other things. If you're doing a goat milk soap, of course, you're going to want to be able to say it's a moisturizing soap because that's the whole reason to do goat milk soap. So those are the words you can say now about your soap because it's in the cosmetic category. And now you just add your ingredients list to that. Now you're going to change this obviously to make it your ingredients that you have in your soap. But make sure as you're going through that list, you have the ingredient that is the largest amount in your recipe first, and then it goes in the list, it goes in descending order. So make sure you've got all your ingredients in descending order. You don't have to give like the amounts, you don't have to give away your recipe, but they just have to know like about how much of each oil. I mean, they're going to be able to estimate which it has the most and how it kind of goes from there in descending order. One word about the word fragrance. Fragrance is a protected word as far as labeling goes. So you do not have to disclose what is in your fragrance. Now that can be good or bad, but just know that that's all that's legally required. You do have to admit that there is a fragrance in your soaps, but you don't have to say anything more than that, for better or worse. Now, on the ingredients list, the lowercase o in mine, it's in the word goat, but a lowercase o in that font, that size, has to be a 1/16 of an inch tall. So again, that's bigger than you think. So be sure to get your ingredients list the right size and then design the rest of the soap or the rest of the label around that to make sure you've got plenty of space for that. This is just one of the topics that we go over in detail in our soap business course called Build Your Business Self-Study. We would love to walk you through even more things as you get started getting your soap business off the ground. So if this video has interested you and you want to learn more about how to do that, how to get your soap business going, you can find the link to that class in the description of this video. I would encourage you to click the link. You're not committing to anything by clicking the link. Just there's a video, there's some words to read about the course. Go check that out and see if that might be a tool to really help you get your business off the ground faster. Soap labeling is not difficult, but there are some specifics you have to be aware of. As you are designing your label, start with these legal requirements in their correct place first. It's way easier to add some design elements and make the label pretty and all uniquely yours if you start with those pieces in place and make them the right size first and then kind of work around them. If you create this great soap label you're absolutely in love with, and then you try to poke in the legal elements kind of and trying to poke them in somewhere where the design really didn't intend them to be and try to do all that but not make it look cluttered, so much harder to start that way. So get your stuff in the right place first and then adjust all the other design elements around it, and you will find that you can have your soap label ready to go pretty quickly. In our next video, I'm going to show you how to create a professional soap label quickly and easily. I'm going to walk you through the steps of how you can get your soap label done like that. So I'll see you there.